Hey, welcome to Life in the Leadership Lane. I'm your host, Bruce Waller, where I get to talk to leaders that are making a difference in the workplace and in our communities. What did they do to get started, and what are they doing to stay there? And here we are, season 4, and I'm bringing you another special guest. Today, I'm getting to talk to Karen Rodriguez. Karen is the Senior Director of Human Resources for Alpha Testing. She is also a certified HR professional with her SHRM-CP. And she's also, and this is actually where I think we first met. You are a previous recipient of HR Executive of the Year, presented at the gala by DallasHR. And I think that was in 2022. Is that right?
Correct. Yes.
Yeah.
Just a year ago.
So glad to have you on the show. How you doing?
I'm so happy to be here. Thanks for having me. And I'm great today. How are you?
Good. Hey, do you remember, I know that we're recording this in February. It's going to play after the 2023 gala, but in 2022, do you remember like that moment? Like, what was that like for you personally? I was just like, go back in your head and just think back, like, what was that like?
I was so honored to be nominated. And when they announced my name, I was absolutely stunned. I can't tell you how special that night was.
Yeah.
And it's one of my favorite nights ever.
And that was a night I met you, and I remember you being up there and thinking, you know what, she is so authentic and genuine, and you were so humble about it. And I was like, I need to get to know Karen more. So anyway, I remember that. That was a lot of fun. Hey, for those who don't know, Alpha Testing, would you share a brief highlight of your organization and how you serve your customers?
Absolutely. So Alpha Testing is a geotechnical engineering services company. And that basically means that we investigate the impact that any kind of geological formations would have on a construction project, which I know sounds very thoughty. I had no idea this industry even existed before I got here. But we test soils and we test concrete in our geotechnical and our construction materials testing departments. We have our own drilling department. We have an environmental department. And so we're just very much a part of the construction process and things that go on beforehand in the construction process as well. So it's a really great industry, and I had a huge learning curve coming from hospitality, but we were recently purchased by UES late 2021. So instead of just having a regional footprint in Texas, we are now nationwide. And so that's a really exciting high growth time for us. And we recently took on another company, Rock Engineering and Testing Laboratories, that also has joined our Texas region. So just an exciting time.
Yeah, I love that. I was just sharing with someone just recently how we just acquired another company in Boston, and it just feels good to work for a company that continues to be in like that growth mode, and you're just part of something bigger. And so I when someone tells me they're in growth mode, they're continuing like acquisitions, I'm like, man, that's you're working for a company that's going places. Hey, I do want to like, so we know each other. We've gotten to know each other really well over the last year or so, and but there's probably some things I don't know about Karen Rodriguez. I would love for you to share your story, and how in the world did you get into HR and leadership?
Well, I was born and raised in Springfield, Missouri, is where I am from, and went to all of my schools there, went to college there at Southwest Missouri State University, which is now Missouri State University.
How close is that to the University of Missouri?
Because that is 2.5, 3 hours.
Oh,
so,
okay.
Yeah, the rest of my family all went to Mizzou, and I went to Missouri State. So
that's fine. You know what? That's interesting you say that, because my brothers and sisters all went to OU, but I went to Central Oklahoma.
Yes,
that is just
absolutely.
Not too far from there. So that's great. Yeah, exactly. No, that's fantastic. I love Missouri.
I stayed close to home, but I graduated with a communications degree, partially because math is just not my friend. So I also thought I was going to go into broadcasting. I had done my internship with a local radio station and did drive time. I did weather. I did traffic. I just kind of did back and forth with the DJ and the host that was on there. And that was a really good time. And when I graduated, I actually went on an interview and got a job doing drive time morning radio in Branson, Missouri. I got the offer for it. I did turn it down because first they were not going to pay me the millions I thought I was going to make in broadcasting.
Of course.
Okay, right. But we ended up, my husband, I just gotten married the month before I graduated college, and we were actually going to move out to Las Vegas. We were going to go out there and just kind of do our own thing. And so I moved out to Las Vegas and did not have a job. So I was with a temporary agency and got housed with a sales department at one of the hotels. And so that's where I got started in hospitality, which was my life before alpha testing. And so ultimately ended up at a hotel management company when I moved back to Dallas, and I got a position with as an assistant for our vice president of human resources with Quorum Hotels and Resorts, which is where I spent the lion's share of my career. So with that position, that is where I really just fell in love with HR. And I told Pam, my boss at the time, I just said, I want to be where you are. So teach me, show me the way. And so that was kind of where I got started. I think that there was one of the recipients last year at the gala who said all roads lead to HR. And it's so true. I feel like that all roads just kind of for me led to HR.
I love that. I love all of that. Did you, Paula Miller, she is a mutual friend of ours. Was she also at Quorum?
She
Is
was.
that where you
Yes,
met
absolutely.
her?
That is
Okay.
how I got to know her. Yep.
Okay. Yeah. No, Paula. Oh man, she's a joy. Man, I got to tell you, I'm with you. Like I remember graduating from college, and I was like, I have no idea. I'm just trying to find a job, right? But I didn't know that. I guess you may have shared this with me, but you had an opportunity for radio.
I
That is
did.
fantastic.
Yes, it was something. I mean, I enjoyed it when I did it. And if I could have stayed in Springfield, if we weren't moving,
Yeah.
I probably would have done that. And who knows
Yeah.
where I'd be today. But
Yeah. Well, it's the same with me. I was in the bowling business with my
yeah,
parents, right? And so,
right.
but the money just wasn't, it
Yeah,
was, in the hours for that job, and probably for also broadcasting, maybe similar, but they're just not, it's just not an 8 to 5 job, right?
it's not,
You might get called out at night in the bowling business. It's nights and weekends. That's when people bowl, when they're off work, right?
of course.
And then I'm sure that there's probably a lot of random hours in radio. That is fantastic. I love that. So I do want to touch on, though, you mentioned something that really got my attention, and you mentioned Pam. And
Mhm.
I want to get into mentors because I want to know, like, what was it about Pam that you said, teach me to do what you do? Because we always talk about how we're models in the workplace for leaders, right?
Right.
And how people are always watching us. And so I'm always trying to like inspire because people have inspired me. But what was it about Pam that made you want to do that, do HR?
Pam, I really had not had, I'd been doing some hiring and I've been doing some things that were considered HR,
Yeah.
duties in former
Hmm.
positions.
Yeah.
But it wasn't a true HR position like I was at Quorum. And so watching her, interact with our team and communicate with all of our hotels that were around the country,
Mm.
I really loved that aspect. And we would get together and we would have, regional meetings, and we would kind of talk about culture building, or we would do talent development and things like that. And talent development really spoke to me. I really enjoyed that piece. And Pam gave me latitude to kind of play and
Hmm.
find out where I wanted to be. We had recently come to there was an ATS that we were wanting to bring on board, and so we were in the process of building that out and working with the salespeople. And I kind of took a leadership role in that and started assisting with the build out and assisting with kind of the training for myself. And Pam came to me and said, hey, we need to be training everybody out in the field. Would you like to develop a training, since you're in here and actively working in the system and kind of know the ins and outs? Would you like to develop something and then go out to the field and train the leaders in the hotels? And man, I'll tell you, that is where the love began. I created that. First of all, I love kind of just being the person who knows, those things, but getting in there and working in the system and developing that training and going out and pushing that
Mm.
information out. I had so much fun kind of in the teacher role, but
Hmm.
also the coach role and just the
Mm.
training role. And I just thought it was absolutely where I wanted to be. And that was where the magic kind of was for me. And that's, training and development is my happy
Mm.
place in HR for sure.
I can
Yeah.
feel
But
it. I can
yeah,
feel
yeah.
it. That's fantastic. I love that. As you tell me that, the first word that came to my mind was empower. Like
Mhm.
she believed in you. She empowered you and said, hey, go do your thing. And that gives that like inspiration, like, whoa, really? Well, okay,
Exactly.
here I go. Well, here you are, you're a senior leader now.
Mhm.
And, you didn't start there. So during that journey, were there other people like Pam that
Mhm.
helped like mentor you? And if so, What was it about them that made them such a great mentor?
So when I moved out to Las Vegas right
Yeah.
after high school,
Yeah.
when I got placed at the hotel, Ann Harland was our director
Mm,
of sales.
mm,
She was a very intimidating woman, very smart, very strong. She knew exactly what she wanted, and she expected excellence from us and demanded it. And as a result, we respected her. She respected us, but
hmm
she knew what she wanted from us. And she decided she was going to hire me away from the temp agency. And so I took a role as a sales coordinator and was basically, an assistant. She brought me in for my very first professional review ever. And in there, she ultimately had my goal as director of sales. And I remember the impact that had on me. And I thought, wow, you think that I'm capable of being in your position, and the value and again, just the impact that it had on me, I wanted to give that to others. Even if it wasn't HR that I knew I wanted at the time, that was what I wanted to impart to other people. Zig Ziglar says, if you aim at nothing, you'll hit it every time. I was hitting a whole lot of nothing. And then when she told me that, I just thought, you know what? Now I've got a goal. Now I kind of know, or somebody thinks I'm capable enough to get to the next level or to the top level, which I definitely held with me. And so I don't think I realized until later
mm,
how much impact she had on who I am as a leader and who
yeah.
I am as a person and how I engage with other people and my team. Even though I probably didn't have the words or the language to identify her as a mentor at the time, she
hmm
definitely was a mentor, and she was my very first one.
Yeah.
She was fantastic.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
that's fantastic. I love how you use the word impact. And,
Hmm.
I think that's interesting. I've had several leaders during my career, like they didn't really know how much they were impacting me. I mean, I look back, I can go right now and I'd love to just sit down with them, or I've written notes to many of them, just letting them know how much they impacted me. And some of those were during some tough times,
Absolutely.
where they, I was like, oh man, I feel like I'm being scolded. But yet when I look back, it was a lesson, a lifetime lesson. Incredible.
She was great at delivering constructive criticism and letting us know where we were kind of failing, but doing so in a way that made me want to do better for her. And so
Mm-hmm.
I always remembered that in her delivery. That was really, really important to me, because I've had constructive criticism delivered in other ways that that wasn't quite that result.
Hey, by the way, if you're listening right now, you need to pull out your pen and your journal and take some notes. There's going to be some good stuff here. I would like to touch on that for a second, since you brought that up, because I've had that, right. And I think there's probably some people listening right now going, oh man, she's talking my language right now. Like I've had some constructive criticism, or I need to give some constructive criticism. I'm
Right.
curious, I don't know, maybe what are a couple of tips that you maybe have learned that have helped you have those, we'll call them tough conversations, but just to like share with people like, hey, here's some things you may look at it like it's critical, but this is critical to your development.
I think that, making sure that you kind of come to them, I think is always very important. When I go into a team member's office or to their space and
Mm-hmm.
have a private conversation with them, if it's out in the open, obviously not, I will bring them into my office. But I think going to them is much less intimidating for them, and just
Mm,
kind of having that conversation, but listening to them and asking and saying, hey, here's what I'm seeing. Either your performance is not here. Let's talk about why it's not. Maybe there's something going on, at the house. I think leading with empathy is always the way to go as a leader.
mm,
And if it's not something like that, maybe they just didn't know, then just, instead of telling them, this is how it should be, you should know better, explain it to them again and just say, how can we reinforce? How can we make sure that we continue this in the future so that we don't fall back into this pattern? But making them just your delivery, I think, is
mm,
everything, and meeting them where they are and making sure that they understand that what they did either wasn't set to expectation or wasn't up to expectation.
mm.
And then just kind of dialing back a little bit and peeling it back and finding out why.
Yeah.
Then I think you guys can work together to get to the solution. But, that constructive criticism and finding out, and something that maybe you sent out an email that had misspelling. I've had this email come to me, or I've had this
Yep.
conversation come to me before, and it was about
hmm
proofreading, and it was delivered in a really harsh way,
Yeah.
and I feel like it could have been done so much better. And it
Yeah.
was, at
Right.
the end of the day, not the end of the world, but I think it also, you have to really kind of weigh how how crucial is this conversation that we're having? How big was
Mm,
the deficit or the, the issue? Is it something that's critical, or is it something that we can
mm.
just really have a conversation? But
Yeah, I like how you ended with that, because sometimes it's not really as big as what you think it is,
no.
and so you have to really weigh that. I had Laura Bustamante on the show just a couple of weeks ago, and she talked about one of the strengths that she has is having honest communication. And I think at the
Absolutely.
end of the day, that's really what it is. It's just, hey, I'm being honest about, and communicating. And she said that if you can communicate with employees, you'll be a great HR professional, but you have to have that honest, open communication, right?
Exactly right. I took strength finders when I was with Quorum, and I remember I had harmony, adaptability, I had empathy, I had kind of all the weak strengths, as I called them. And I wanted
Oh
woo, and I
no,
wanted
I have
activator, and I
harmony,
wanted
I think.
I wanted achiever. But I had no idea how much how well my strengths were going to,
Yeah,
help me in the leadership space. So I
yeah.
mean, in HR space. So those are all things that I think are definite, that help me find my lane. So
Mhm.
I definitely lean into those a lot in HR.
That's a perfect segue. Find your lane. I love that. And by the way, isn't it funny how like we see ourselves differently than someone else might see us? Because I thought the same thing when I took my strength finders. I was like hoping for
Yeah.
some driver-like traits,
I
and
wanted
they were
something else.
nowhere to be found. I was like,
No,
huh.
nowhere with me.
Yeah. So, but it's amazing how much our strengths can help others in being ourselves. And
Absolutely.
so I love all of that you shared. Hey, let's talk about finding your lane. Yeah,
Mhm.
you started out. I mean, you started out in broadcasting, then you're like in a sales type role. You go to HR, and then here you are today having a great career. You've had a lot of success. Was there like a moment, or maybe there were several moments, but was there a time where you said, you know what, this is my lane. I enjoy HR, and I'm just going to lean into it and invest everything I got in that. Do you recall any moments?
When I was with Quorum, again, I had a lot of moments at
Yep.
Quorum. I had a lot of
Yeah.
time
And
at
you were
Quorum,
there,
but
and you were there for a long time.
I was there for 11 years. So
Yeah.
it
Okay.
was the big share of my
Yep.
career in HR. But I was, after I moved past the ATS training, in
Hmm.
development,
Yep.
I was responsible for our select service group. And
Okay.
so with that select service group, we needed to really boost up our customer service scores. And so
Hmm.
I built out an orientation that really focused on that customer service. And it was a 5-hour program orientation. It was the full first day, and it was very interactive. We had activities, obviously, and it was just a lot of back and forth. And I didn't just do all the talking. I relied, on them to kind of tell me where they've come from and what's important to them, what does customer service mean to them. And through that and doing those, I learned that I looked forward to orientation days where I had never
Mm.
done that before. I look forward to those orientation days and kind of being in that teacher role and leading role more than any other day. And so that was where I just kind of said, I think HR is where I want to be. I enjoy all aspects of HR, but I will say the learning and development and the training and the coaching, those are really big for me. So that is where I knew that I wanted to be in HR for sure.
Okay, I know the title of your next book, Looking Forward to Orientation Day. I love that. That is fantastic, because, when I think about orientation, I think about like onboarding, I think about the employee experience. We're all talking about that. And there's many times I remember with different companies that I was with, seeing new employees come in. This even happened to me too. And you're like, hey, where do I start? Yeah, somebody get with you. We'll get you a login. We'll get you a password. And you're just sitting there and you're like, this is, there's no plan. You can just
Didn't know you
feel
were
it.
coming today. Oh, that's
Didn't really
horrible.
know
That's
you
the
were
worst.
coming. And by the way, the boss is out of town this week. He might take you to lunch.
Welcome.
What? So that's so important
It
though. And
is.
then for you to say, I look forward to that. Think
Yeah.
about the employees that come in, like what they got to receive on the receiving end of that, right?
Hopefully, yes. I hope that's the case. Definitely. That's the goal.
I love that. That's a great story. That's fantastic. Hey, let's talk leadership here. I always like to ask my guests that come on the show, there's so many different ways to define leadership. If someone said, hey, Karen, what's leadership to you? How would you respond to that?
I think that a leader, I don't know that there's a sentence or a catchphrase. I think that it's trust. I think that it's respect. I think it's knowing that you are never done learning. It's checking your ego at the door, developing the trust and the respect of your team, I think is what it really boils down to. But it's also, it's empathy. It's listening. It is not, leading from the front. It's definitely leading from the back, giving them and empowering them to do what they need to do. So it's certainly not a position, it's not a boss position. I have a lot of leaders in our company that are not in senior leadership positions, and they are incredibly respected, and people follow them. I think that that's what leadership is. I certainly don't think that it's the position that you hold.
Well, I agree with that. I don't think you have to have a title either, because I tell people all the time, leading myself's like one of the hardest jobs I've ever had in my entire career. Just saying, Bruce,
yes.
Get out of bed. Bruce, you need to go get this project done, or you need to make that happen. So I love how you said that. And then just using all of the words trust and respect. I think that great leaders are so well respected because they are what you just said, they're just great listeners, and they just get everybody's viewpoints and collaboratively make that decision to where everybody just feels like they're part of it.
Exactly.
I love that. One of the things that you and I were talking about not too long ago was the importance of having a cohesive team, like that high performance team. And I was just going to ask you your thoughts on, you've been on some great teams before. What were some of the, and for those listening, because I know there's some people listening, some of them are departments of one, some of them have a team of 3, some of them have a team of 35, right?
Yep.
What would you say was maybe some traits of a high performance team, and how important is that as a leader serving in HR?
I have one in particular in our company that is just incredibly cohesive. I think that it's mutual respect. Again, I think it's that checking that ego at the door, the ability to engage in healthy conflict, I think is incredibly important. And I think the feeling of safety to raise their hand and say, I don't know, I messed up, I haven't seen this before, where some other people, may just kind of move on and try to fix it themselves, and then you're farther behind. And I think that having a really clear goal and vision with the buy-in is really, really important.
Yeah, you said something that was, you framed it up a little bit differently, and I've heard this before from other leaders. And you said have healthy engagement.
In conflict.
Yeah, in conflict. That's the hard part. We talked about crucial conversations earlier, but I had someone tell me one time, they said, if you aren't engaging in a healthy, like in conflict, then a lot of people think that it's not, they just think that you really don't care. Like I've heard that before, like a high performing team, a lot of times you think, oh man, they're all in conflict, they're all engaging, but that's a healthy way to develop as a team, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. You have to have the permission, and you have to, again, that safe space, right? Like understanding that somebody is going to maybe come at you and say, I disagree with this. And then you guys can have a back and forth, but it doesn't have to be ugly. It has to be respectful, and there are boundaries there and rules that you have to abide by. And you can, decide on those rules as a group. But I think it's really important to allow that and have latitude for that.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. I love that. The mutual respect. Hey, you also mentioned something else, and I had sent you a few questions to kind of be thinking about, and this wasn't one, but you mentioned something here that really, every time it's mentioned, it just catches my attention because I live it and I've lived it. And you said, you have to be willing to go through failure. Sometimes people mess up. Is what you said. And talk a little bit about failure, because I think that's one of the things that we're all, I don't know, many of us are afraid that we don't want to fail, because then all of a sudden now it makes us look bad. We're not part of that, but failure is part of the process, isn't it?
It is part of the process. And, failing as fast as you can or failing forward is definitely important. But if you're not failing, then you're not growing. And so that's really problematic.
Yeah. And as a team, like a high performing team, I'm sitting here thinking about, if somebody's failing, I think some of the, when you have a high performing team, you watch people pick each other up.
Exactly.
That's
exactly right. I think that, with my team in particular, if somebody does fail, we kind of all come in and we
Mm,
triage, figure out what the situation is,
yeah.
and then we rectify the situation, but we do so in a way that the other person understands what we're doing so that moving forward, they have the tools to move forward and they don't, have that hiccup again. But I think that just, yes, moving through those pieces. And I mean, in my career, I've had many a failure. And my problem is, and I will admit that I have a real struggle with, I will ruminate and I will work to get
Mm,
something perfect before I move it out. And
yeah.
progress over perfection is just, I mean, something that one of my leaders had imparted to me, and that's stuck with me. Like, let's just get the ball moving. Let's move the goalpost down the field. You've got to make some progress here. You do not have to have it all figured out. You don't have to have perfection before you launch.
I know. I'm glad you brought that up. Lisa Keglovitz was on the show recently, and she talked about that was one of the lessons she learned from one of her mentors was where you talked about progress over perfection. It's like you don't have to have 100% of the information to go make it happen. You just got to
Nope.
go make it happen. I think that's what stalls a lot of us is that we think that we have to get it perfect. Now, yes, you're a communication major. If there's a press release going
Yes.
out, we've got to make sure that there's no misspelled
Accuracy.
words, right? Accuracy.
Different.
But that's a lot. That's exactly right.
Yeah.
Hey, I want to ask you, and the reason why I wanted to ask about high performing teams is because I think that's where the employee experience starts. It's a big topic. Everybody's talking about how can we drive a better employee experience. If you're in a conference, people are talking about how can we drive a better attendee experience. If you're a speaker, I hear them talking about how can we drive a better speaker experience. All of these, but in the workplace for a better employee experience, it starts with it starts with the leadership and having a great team. And then I wanted to ask you. Is that talked about in your meetings, the employee experience, and what are maybe some things you do at your organization to elevate that employee experience? Could you share maybe something about that?
Absolutely. Well, the employee experience starts the second the recruiter or the hiring manager speaks to the candidate on the phone. So we want to make sure
Oh,
that we are definitely talking about the company in a positive light. We want to make sure that we're talking about the position and we're interviewing them to make sure that they are a good fit for our culture. So I think that that's where the first experience and the first impression starts. And then once we move through, we kind of get to the drug testing and the background checks and just making sure that we stay in constant communication and it's not overly burdensome for them. I think also orientation. That was something that my team and I met on yesterday. We went through our orientation and say, how can we make this better? How can we make this more interactive? How can we really tell the alpha story? Bring in rock, bring in UES, because it's a confusing, piece. Like we have different pieces to our company, but really making that easy and digestible for the new candidate. And then also we make sure that the lights are on when somebody comes in for orientation. We have a welcome up on our screen. Welcome so and so to the team. We know exactly who's coming in. It's on all of our calendars. And then quickly just into orientation again, we make sure that music is playing and that there is a slideshow of all of our really cool projects that we work on so that people can start to get, have that buy-in and feel that pride, for working for alpha testing and some of the wonderful projects that we work on. So I think it starts there. And then throughout, we celebrate birthdays, we celebrate milestone anniversaries. We make sure that we celebrate our holidays. We bring in food trucks. We had a crawfish boil. We do things with our families outside of work. We do team, groups. They're not mandatory, but we do get together after work every once in a while. And I think that that's really important just to kind of get to know one another outside of work, right? So that your team can kind of get to know leaders and you vice versa. I think that that's not in the workspace is just kind of where the magic happens. And then to kind of further, we make sure that we develop career paths for the largest contingent of our workforce. We've got career pathing and we initiated coaching. We've got Alpha University. We've got, our other certifications that people can get. So we've really just tried to drive development and training and try to keep that engagement piece alive for them. So I hope that all really enhances the employee experience.
That is fantastic. I know there's people listening right now that are going, oh my gosh, this is so good. Because you basically said the first experience is with the first call.
Absolutely.
And I was like, oh my gosh, I was sitting here thinking about like when they come in, we just talked about orientation, but you're like, nope, it starts with the first call. And so I've talked about the employee experience, even when someone's relocating to one from a city to another. So that's part of the employee experience is that relocation. And so I'm always talking about elevating that employee experience. But I love how you just like, you really like just amplify that recognition. You have the welcome sign, you have the slideshow. And then one other area that I didn't think about, but it's the career pathing. Like that is so important to people today. They want to know, where am I going? And that
Right.
creates that experience for them going, you know what, when I come here, I know what we're doing. I know where we're going. I know why we're doing it. And we can move that way, right?
How
That's
to get to that
fantastic.
next level. Yep. That's important.
Oh my goodness. This has been so good. I love this. Hey, let me ask you, I mean, like I said, I've gotten to know you over the last year or so, and I feel like you're a pretty driven leader. What drives you?
Oh, what drives me? Connecting with my team, I love alpha testing is my heart. I
Mm,
absolutely love alpha. And so connecting with my team
yeah,
when I get to work is
yeah,
absolutely one of the things that drives me. And also developing, making sure that we're actually moving in a direction so that we're creating, future leaders, succession
yeah.
planning, and all of that kind of thing. I just think is incredibly important. But relationally, I'm a relator, so I love the connection piece with the people. Definitely
Strength
drives me every
finders,
day.
the relator. I love
Abs-
that.
Live it every day.
Hey, well, before we get off topic here, one of the things you mentioned early on is you love the development piece and you continue to develop. And I was just wondering for those that are listening right now, they may be early career, they may be mid career, but they're just thinking to themselves, how can I continue to develop as a leader? Any tips you would share? I don't know if you have a development program, but any tips you might share that you would say, hey, you know what, here's some things that have helped me get to where I am today, or here's some things we're doing for our team members. Any thoughts around that?
We get so involved in Netflix and what's on
Mm,
TV. I think
mm,
that separating yourself from that for a little bit each day
yeah,
and reading something that's nonfiction or listening to a development or leadership podcast, I think those
yeah,
are huge. I think, creating a network for yourself,
mm,
finding people in your same space,
yeah,
or even peers, across function, that way you can connect with and maybe learn more about the business. Maybe you learn something that you didn't know, that you really loved over on this side. But regardless, cross-functional relationships, it's one of the biggest on my list. I also think that joining an HR organization, if you're going to be in the HR space,
yeah,
Dallas HR, SHRM,
yep,
something like
yep,
that,
yep.
I think is really important. And also that progress over perfection that I mentioned
Mm,
before, just, making the move, right? So like you
yeah.
don't need the permission. But I think
Mm-hmm,
also what's really important, and this is where I learned something about myself, is
mm-hmm,
that you do not need permission to be a leader or to apply for that next position, or
mm,
somebody's not going to say it's time, you're ready for a director, or you're ready for a VP, or you're ready for CHRO. You've got to bet on yourself. You've got to believe on
mm,
yourself, make that move. I mean, that is just, it's all you can do. If you fail,
mm-hmm.
then find out why, go back and retry.
I am like, I have chills. Bet or believe on yourself. Are you kidding me? That is fantastic. I heard John Maxwell say that one time. He said, hey, if you're not betting on yourself, who's going to bet on you?
Exactly right.
And I know there's some people listening that are like, they're writing that down right now going, you know what? I do have value here. I am ready and I'm going to follow my heart or my gut on where I want to go. And so I appreciate you sharing that. That's fantastic. I told you the time was going to fly by, but I do want to ask you a question that I like to ask around advice. And I want to ask you, have you ever been given any advice? It was just so good. You just find yourself sharing that with others often.
Yes. I think the biggest nugget that I have taken is just to surround yourself with people who are smarter than you are. You do
Mm,
not have to be the smartest person in the room. And if you surround yourself with people who are smarter than you are, I mean, let them, delegate, let them take the load, and then just sit back and watch it happen. That has been the most helpful piece, in certainly growing my career. But I definitely make sure I surround myself with smart people.
yeah, that's great, great advice. As you share that though, I know there's probably some people that are thinking, and I remember thinking this as a young leader as well, like, oh, I don't know if I belong in that group of smarter people. Like, I just don't know. But what I learned was I went through I kind of look when I reflected later in my career. I look back when I was a young leader in my current company 20 years ago at Armstrong, and I'm sitting
Mhm.
around the boardroom. And I noticed that I'm the youngest person in the room. There's a lot of older people in the room. And so every time they talked, I would want to listen to them. I wanted to be a sponge. I wanted to learn from them. Then when it was my turn to talk, I was like, I didn't really share because I didn't really feel like I had anything to share.
Right.
And now today I'm sitting in the boardroom and I'm the older guy and and there's all these young people and I want to know what they have to say.
Yep.
So now all of a sudden I'm looking back going, the older people want to hear the younger people and the younger people want to hear the older people. So it goes
Exactly.
back to what you just said. You have to believe in yourself. And
Mhm.
when you surround yourself with smarter people, you have to just believe that you should be there, right?
Exactly. Yes, you just have to step into it. I
Yeah.
mean, there is nobody who has it all figured out, right? You
Yeah.
just have to do what you can to develop yourself and show up at the table. And if somebody asks you a question and you don't know the answer, I hope you have a safe space to say, I just don't know the answer, but I'll get back to you.
That's fantastic. This is so good. Oh my goodness. I love this. This is fantastic. As I mentioned, the time flies by, and I want to shift over to it's time to accelerate. And it's where I ask some fun questions. And first question I like to ask, because you mentioned earlier in the leadership development, maybe it includes a podcast, but I'm curious about you. Would you rather read a book or listen to a podcast or listen to an Audible?
I would love to read a book, and I do read, but I will say that my drive time, I have
Yeah.
so much time in the car that
Yeah.
podcasts and audibles are probably where I live and spend most of
Perfect.
my time.
Yep.
I am not going to lie, I am a true crime fan. So I am there.
Oh,
Oh, for sure, for sure. But leadership and development, I mean, that is my wheelhouse.
yeah.
And so I am 90% of the time, that is what I am listening to. This podcast is one of them. I've got, Maxwell, I've got Entree Leadership, Mark Efron, Pat Lencioni. I mean, I listen to pretty much all of those, and
Yeah.
I just devour every word.
I
But
know. They're all
I
great.
love the book. Like, there's something just romantic about holding a book, right? It's like a newspaper. So I do love that. I just don't do it as often as I would like.
I love that. And when you said true crimes, I was just talking with I bet you in my last 10 guess, if you were to poll, the majority would say true crime. Like that is like the number one thing. And my daughter loves true crime. So when she listens to a good one, she'll text me and she'll say, Dad, you've got to listen to this one.
I always love a good recommendation, so feel
Yeah.
free.
Okay. I love it. I love it. Me too. That's fantastic. Hey, well, let me ask you this. I mean, I always talk about great leaders or grateful leaders. What are you grateful for?
I am really good at practicing gratitude, I will say. I am grateful for my good health. I am grateful for my family and their
Yeah.
good health and their safety. I am grateful for my job. I'm grateful for my home, my dogs.
Mhm.
There's very little. I mean, I really can find gratitude in everything. And it's funny when I'm asked, hey, you should do this or you should buy this or you should go here. I'm like, will this make my life appreciably better? And if the answer is no, pass.
Mm.
I'm going to just, pass on that. I am fine where I am. So those are the things I'm grateful for every single day.
Yeah. I love how you shared how that seems to come easier to you because
Mm.
what your values are, what's important to you, and you're a very grateful person. And I'm
Yep.
the same way. Like I like writing in a journal every day. I've been doing that
Yes.
for many, many, many years. And every time I was sharing this in a presentation recently, that every time I get this, every once in a while you get in that situation where maybe you got to have that. We talked earlier about crucial conversation
Oh, yes.
and you get that little black cloud over your head and you're like, oh my gosh, go away, go away. But it seems like when you lean into the gratitude, it
Mhm.
kind of like disappears. Like, you know what?
Exactly.
This is the little thing. Like, I'm so grateful for all of these big things. That right there, conversation or whatever I'm going through, that's the little thing. So when you're good at practicing gratitude, it helps you as a leader, doesn't it?
Yeah, it absolutely does.
Yeah, I love
You
that.
bet.
Hey, what about outside of work? I mean, I know you work a lot. High performers put in a lot of hours. What about
Mhm.
outside of work? What energizes you? What do you like to do?
Love to hang out with my friends. My husband and I have a great group of friends that we love to either go to dinner with or go on trips with, something like that. I love to travel. We have 3 dogs. We used to have 6, so we are down to 3 now. So I mean, we love the animals. So we love to walk them and go out with them and go to the dog park with them. That's always such a good time. So
Yeah,
I would say, those are the big ones. And I'm not going to lie, every once in a while, Netflix energizes me.
there you
So
go.
I have to
There you
find a good
go.
show.
I love that because earlier you said you need to give yourself permission to be part of groups or to go for that next, whatever
Yep.
that next is. But you also need to give yourself permission too to, you know what, it's time to take a break and recharge and watch Netflix or whatever that is. And so you have to kind of
Absolutely.
find that balance. I love that. Hey, Karen, this is my last question and probably one of my favorite questions. Karen, 10 years older, is around the corner and she's
Mhm.
knocking at your door.
Okay.
And you're going to go answer that door. What's she gonna share with you?
I think she says, apply for that job, bet
Mm,
on yourself again,
mm,
and get off the couch and go make some memories because that 10 years goes by in a
mm.
flash. And you're right, that 10 years will be here before we know it. Yeah, I think that just making the move, progress over perfection, taking the step.
Yeah, every time I look at my children, I think about how quick time flies as they get older. And I can see that's a 10-year older, wiser Karen
Yes.
Rodriguez. I'm so grateful for you coming on the show today and just sharing so many like tips and that listeners are going to be able to take away from. You got great wisdom. If someone heard you on the podcast, they're like, hey, I didn't know Karen. I want to learn more. Is there a way that they could connect with you or follow you?
Yeah, absolutely. On LinkedIn, I'm at
Okay.
KRod14, I believe it is, but Karen Rodriguez Alpha Testing will get you there. And then also with my work email, krodriguez@alphatesting.com. More than welcome to email me there at any time. I would love to connect.
Perfect. I will put that in the show notes. And then I always like to mention if you're going to reach out to Life in Leadership Lane guests, be sure to let them know you heard them on the podcast. I mean, I think they would love to hear like, well, what did you hear that that you wanted to make you connect? And it makes that connection a lot easier whenever you know where those connections are coming from. And
Sure.
Karen, you're definitely driving in the leadership lane again. I appreciate you and your perspective and your friendship. And I appreciate you coming on the show today and sharing with everyone.
I appreciate you and thank you for having me on today. I enjoyed it.
Well, you're welcome. I can't wait to share this. I'll talk to you later.
Sounds good. Bye bye.